Since you were a child, you've heard about let there be light. But have you ever wondered what existed before that? I don't just mean what was in the shadows, but what had not yet been allowed to exist. What was there before the light? A void? A silence? Or perhaps a kind of dormant consciousness, waiting to be awakened? What if the light was not created, but free? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you deeply. Religion's sacred books, sermons repeated throughout the centuries, all speak of light as the starting point of creation, but few ask themselves of the order and because precisely at that moment. Was let there be light the first act of God or the first memory of something that already existed before time? In the mysteries of creation, there are questions that defy the limits of reason. Traditional spirituality often recoils from them. But here, in this space, you will allow yourself to go further, because there is something within you that he knows, something that always felt like there was more to it than what was taught. Have you ever experienced this? That feeling that the story you were told is incomplete? Light, in occult scriptures and apocryphal texts, is not just clarity. It is power. It is presence. In some accounts forgotten by tradition, it is an awakened entity, a consciousness that emerged from the abyss as if returning from 1,000-year slumber. What if this is true? What if the let there be light is, in fact, a call back? And in this call, what else was awakened? Don't worry if this seems strange to you now. The pieces will fall into place. You just need to be willing to listen with new eyes and see with a new heart, because when the light awakens, not everything it reveals is comfort. Sometimes it exposes what the divine tried to hide from the eyes of men. But this is just the beginning, because when the light awakens, it doesn't just break through the darkness. It reveals what was hidden within us. And perhaps that's why so many traditions have silenced these kinds of questions, because those who question beginning end up rediscovering their own path. And now, I want to invite you to join me on this journey. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what resonated most with you so far. What part resonated with you? Your experience, your perspective, or even your question could be the answer someone else is searching for. Believe me, there are many people thirsting for the same hidden truth, and when you share it, you light it up in others. And if this search resonated with your feelings, don't forget to like the video. It may seem short, but it shows YouTube that this content deserves to be seen by more people and helps keep this mission of revealing the mysteries of creation alive. And of course, if you want to continue receiving these spiritual enigmas, these soul-stirring questions, subscribe to the channel now. Here, each video is like a whisper from the beginning, and together we will piece together the puzzle of what has been hidden for centuries, because the truth doesn't reveal itself all at once. It presents itself in fragments, and the next one may be closer than you think. Now I want to go even deeper into the subject, because if you stop and think about it, the idea that light was created stems from a fixed point in time, a command, an instant when something emerged from nothing. But what if it wasn't quite like that? What if the let there be light wasn't the origin, but the awakening of something that was already there, dormant, latent, waiting for permission to reveal itself? This possibility changes everything. It changes our understanding of creation, of time, of divinity, and even of our own existence. Think about it. To create is to bring into existence that which was not, but to awaken is merely to remember what already is. The difference between these two concepts is subtle, but absolutely transformative. If light was created, then it depends on an act. But if it was awakened, then it predates that act. It is essence, pure consciousness, perhaps even older than time itself. This question may seem overly philosophical at first glance, but it has a direct impact on how you see the world, on how you understand your personal journey. Because if the light has only just been awakened, it means there's something within you, and within all of us, that may also be simply dormant, waiting for the right moment to emerge. In texts forgotten and hidden throughout history, we find clues to this. Fragments of revelations that escaped religious censorship and survived as whispers behind the scenes of faith. The Zohar, for example, speaks of primordial light, the Or Ein Sof, that existed before any physical manifestation. It was not created. It's simply the Book of Enoch, rejected by the councils and considered too dangerous to be canonical, describes beings of light who existed before the verb, contemplating the mystery before any word was spoken. And when we look at these sources with unencumbered eyes, unfiltered by institutionalized tradition, we realize that the creation narrative itself is full of gaps. Why did the Spirit hover over the waters before anything was said? What were these waters? And why was there darkness before off the light control? The answer may lie in something that many esoteric and mystical currents call origin consciousness, an eternal, infinite state where everything already exists in potential, waiting to be awakened by divine will. In this context, light is not the beginning of creation. It is the first remembrance, the first movement back to hidden truth. And perhaps that is why, when light emerges, it does not immediately create order, it merely separates. Separating light from darkness is a profound symbolic gesture. It reveals that both were already there, that there was not an annihilation of darkness, but a distinction, a recognition, as if God himself were saying, now, this and that will be different things, but both are part of me. And that is a precious clue, because all this leads us to a powerful reflection on consciousness, choice, and awakening. What you call enlightenment may not be something you need to achieve, but something you need to remember. And if the light has been within you all along, perhaps the true miracle lies to receive it, but recognize it. And that's why understanding the seemingly small detail, whether the light was created or awakened, is so important, because it changes the foundation of your spirituality. It transforms the way you view the sacred, and even how you make decisions in your life. After all, if the divine begins not with creation, but with remembrance, then your spiritual awakening also begins not with a search, but with our turn. Comment here. I'm on this journey too. I want to know who is with me on this path of rediscovering what has always been here, waiting to be remembered. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because to understand what really happened in the beginning, we need to go back to what many consider the absolute beginning. Genesis 1 verse 3. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. This phrase is undoubtedly one of the most well-known in the entire Bible, but it is also one of the most superficially interpreted. Most people read it as a simple act of creation, almost like a divine snap of the fingers. God spoke, and something came into being. But was that really the case? If you look carefully, you will notice that this verse appears only after that the text has already described the existence of darkness and a spirit hovering over the waters. In other words, before the light, something already existed. The primordial chaos was not absolute nothingness. It was a landscape full of potential, but still without a defined form. Light, in this context, is not the first creation. It is the first organization command, a turning point, a separation between what was together but invisible. And here comes a fascinating question. The word "let there be" in the original Hebrew comes from the verb he, which means to be, to become, to exist, but not just in the sense of bringing something new into existence. It can also imply manifestation, revelation. This changes everything. God may not be creating light as something new, but allowing it to manifest. Let it reveal itself. Let it become visible within that primordial scenario. This detail changes our spiritual mindset, because if even the light, this sacred and pure essence, was hidden before being called, it means Thetex Existit is not just being created. It is also being recognized, set apart, named. How many hidden truths, how many potentials, how many lights exist within us, waiting for that same call. Genesis isn't just a text about the outside world. It's a symbolic mirror of our inner journey. Let there be light is an archetype of spiritual awakening. It's when consciousness speaks, and what was once confusing and dark begins to make sense. When you say enough to the chaos and begin to name your shadows. This command is much more than creation. It's a decision, a divine decision, but also a human decision. And here, it is worth noting another curious detail. God creates light, but the sun and stars only appear days later. This means that the light mentioned in the third verse is not physical. It does not depend on stars or solar systems. It is something else. It is a kind of presence, energy, spiritual clarity that precedes even matter itself. Mystical theology calls this primordial light, a light that illuminates not the physical world, but the world of consciousness. It reveals the invisible. It exposes what is within. This light is what, according to various occult traditions, was hidden after sin, veiled from human eyes, reserved only for those who truly seek it. Therefore, many ancient scholars associate "let there be light" with a collective awakening of a human soul, a moment when the Creator releases a spark from his own being, a spark that comes to inhabit the interior of all life. And perhaps it's this light that people miss without realizing it. That feeling of emptiness, even surrounded by achievements, may just be the echo of this unanswered call. The absence of this light awakens this forgotten memory. It doesn't light up on its own. It needs listening, desire, surrender, and sometimes silence, because this light, according to some apocryphal texts, did not come to illuminate only the universe. It came to reveal what was already within us. It's not a lamp. It's a mirror. And by saying, "let there be light," God wasn't just creating, he was initiating a dialogue with existence. And in this dialogue, there is still much that needs to be said. Comment here. That makes sense to me. I want to feel those who also recognize this light not as something external, but as something that already pulses silently in the center of their own soul. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because even before "let there be light," there's a mysterious image that goes almost unnoticed by those who read Genesis literally. The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. This phrase comes before the light, before the Word, before any order creation. And this raises a question that is rarely discussed. What existed in this silent moment? And what does the Spirit mean, hovering, watching, waiting? In the original language of the text, the verb used for hovered is rather, which conveys the idea of a gentle vibration, a subtle movement like that of a bird protecting something with its wings. It's not just a passive presence. It's care, expectation, and hidden intention. This description suggests that before the visible universe took shape, there was an observing consciousness, a living, silent intelligence, yet charged with creative potential. And this consciousness didn't arise with the cry, "let there be light." It was already there. This detail completely changes the way we understand creation, because we've been taught that everything begins with the word, with the sound that breaks the silence. But what this passage reveals is that there was something before the sound, a state before the word, a moment when everything was suspended, not in absolute emptiness, but in a kind of cosmic gestation, a purposeful waiting. What if the Spirit hovering over the waters is actually the feminine aspect of divinity? Many ancient traditions interpret this moment as the presence of the wisdom, yes, the Shekinah, from the Creator's intuitive essence. It is no coincidence that Proverbs 8 describes wisdom as standing beside God at the beginning of his way, like a master builder who rejoiced over creation. This suggests that before order, there was communion. Before light, there was consciousness. Before manifestation, there was deep inner listening. It is in this space between silence and words that the greatest secrets of creation are hidden, because there is no form, no dogma, no doctrine. There is only presence. A presence that knows, that feels, that waits. And perhaps this is the origin of everything, a divine consciousness ready to express itself. Now, think about this from a perspective of your own journey. How many times have you felt in the dark, waiting for something to happen? What if this darkness isn't absence, but preparation? What if the Spirit also hovers over your waters, over your turbulent emotions, your hidden fears, your deepest silences? This changes our relationship with time, with waiting, with silence, because it ceases to be a painful void and becomes an incubator of revelations. What's more, the fact that water existed before light tells us that there was a fluid, emotional, spiritual territory, but one not yet illuminated. This means that creation does not begin from absolute nothingness. It emerges from something already existing, but not yet revealed. And this brings us closer to the idea that the divine does not create from absence, but from the hidden. Creation is not an invention. It is a revelation. This hidden truth is what transforms our mindset, because it reminds us that everything we don't yet understand, everything that's confusing or in shadow, may not be the end, but just the beginning of something that's about to reveal itself. Sometimes chaos isn't a sign of destruction. It's the fertile ground from which light is about to emerge. And this soil is us. Comment here. The light was already here. Let's see who else is seeing beyond the words. Now I want to go even deeper into the subject, because what traditional text suggests between the lines, forgotten and forbidden books scream in silence. There are revelations that have never been made from the pulpit, not for lack of importance, but for excessive impact. These are truths that threaten structures, that destabilize narratives constructed to keep the sacred under control. Truths that speak of light, not as a creation of God, but as a living extension of his consciousness. The Book of Enoch, for example, is one such text, banned from most Christian traditions, ignored for centuries, but preserved in fragments by hands that knew the value of what they guarded. In it, creation does not begin with "let there be light." It begins with a vision of the Watchers, beings of light who observe, guard, and record the eternal mysteries. These beings were not created in Genesis. They were there before Enoch encounters them not as symbolic figures, but as conscious intelligences that transit between worlds. Light in this context is not a physical phenomenon. It is an awakened being, a kind of entity that pulsates with purpose. Now, cross this with what Proverbs 8 reveals to us about wisdom. There, she speaks in the first person. She says she was born before all things, that she was with God as a craftsman, and that she was the delight of the eternal. This wisdom is not an idea. It is a presence, a consciousness that existed before time, matter, and the creative word itself. What if this wisdom is light itself? What if "let there be light" was a call for her to emerge and take her place in manifestation? Gnostic schools of thought, persecuted in silence for centuries, maintain precisely this, that light is an emanation of the supreme mind, a spark carrying within itself the code of creation, and that, upon awakening in the physical world, this light fragments, scattering fragments of divine consciousness everywhere, including within ourselves. According to these texts, humanity's greatest mistake was not falling, but forgetting that we are made of the same substance as the awakened light, forgetting that before matter, before names, before religion, there was only this, light and consciousness. This is why so many ancient accounts speak of a return, a rescue, a remembering, because the spiritual path is not an ascent towards something new. It is a return to something that has always been. And that's where the true impact of these revelations lies. They don't ask you to believe in a new doctrine. They ask you to remember who you are, that you're not just a creature trying to find God. You're part of the very language through which God chose to express himself. A living phrase in the great poem of existence. And the light that was called back in the beginning, perhaps it was you. And if all this is true, or at least part of a larger truth we are still unraveling, then the forbidden texts are not a threat, but a bridge. They are not heresy. They are glimpses of a spiritual memory that institutionalized tradition has tried to erase. But the memory doesn't fade. It falls asleep. And one day it awakens. Write it down. I am part of the awakened light, just so I know who else is remembering. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because when we speak of light in a spiritual context, we are far from just talking about something visible. The sacred light, the one mentioned in the scriptures and echoed in mystical texts, is not made of photons. It does not depend on the sun, fire, or any physical source. It is a symbol, an archetype, a code that spans cultures, mythologies, and revelations, always carrying the same call, that of awakened consciousness. In sacred language, nothing is said by chance. Every word carries multiple layers of meaning, and light is perhaps one of the most powerful of all, because it is not just clarity, it is separation, not just that which reveals, but that which differentiates. And this is essential. The moment light appears in Genesis, what God does next is separate light from darkness. Give a name, define space, establish order. Light, therefore, is not just something that shines. It is a force that structures. Some traditions interpret this as an act of consciousness, because only those who are awake can differentiate. Only those who have light within can clearly see what is shadow. And this is the true symbolic power of divine light. It doesn't nullify darkness, It delimits it. It doesn't destroy chaos. It organizes, as if to say, here begins a path. From here, something makes sense. This is why in so many ancient cultures, light is associated with the principle of cosmic order, and not just something good or beautiful. But this symbol goes beyond organization. In many esoteric texts, light is described as a movement, something that vibrates, that pulsates, that expands. A living energy that originates from the center and touches everything around it. And if you look closely, this is present even in modern physics. Light is both wave and particle. It occupies space and time, but also defies the limits of what we understand as matter. And this echoes a hidden truth. Perhaps the light of creation is not an object, but a decision, a conscious gesture, a movement of the divine within the invisible. Imagine this for a moment. A dark universe, not because it was empty, but because it had not yet been revealed. A space where everything was present, but still without identity. The light enters not as something new, but as permission for what already existed to be named, separated, understood. This completely changes our relationship with spirituality, because it shows us that awakening is not about inventing something new within yourself. It is about naming what has always been there, but was still silent. This light is what the Kabbalistic texts call or Haganas, the hidden light, the one God hid after creation, so that only the righteous could find it. It's not a physical light. It's a light of understanding, of perception, of revelation, and it appears in the lives of those who choose to see beyond appearances. In that moment when you look at a difficult situation, and instead of getting lost in the chaos, you see meaning, direction, purpose. This is light. This is consciousness awakening. And this symbol is so powerful that it's even present in Jesus' words when he says, "The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light." This is not an empty metaphor. It's a spiritual code, because the gaze isn't just what you see. It's what interprets, what chooses the focus, what reveals or hides. And if your gaze is pure, full of true intention, then your entire existence begins to be illuminated from within. This shows that light, at its deepest essence, is a decision to see more deeply, to allow consciousness to move within chaos, to choose understanding over illusion. And this is why mystics say that light doesn't come from outside. It reveals itself when the veil is torn from within. Comment here. I choose to see with light. Let's light this path together from within. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because if the light has been awakened, it's inevitable to ask, what made it sleep? What existed before this awakening? And what still remains dormant, lurking in the abyss? This is one of those questions that bothers us, because it forces us to look at something most people prefer to avoid, the silence before creation, the void full of meaning. Chaos not as error, but as origin in the traditional narrative. We are led to think of the abyss as a place of disorder, a non-place, a mistake awaiting correction. But what if it's the opposite? What if the abyss is not absence, but totality? A dimension where everything is present at once, but without form, name, or division. A place where the light has not yet been summoned, but already exists, latent, raw, powerful. In ancient mystical traditions, the abyss is viewed not with fear, but with respect. It is a receptacle of creation, the invisible womb where everything rests before being manifested. In the Zohar, for example, it is described as a space of ein, absolute nothingness, the mystery prior to being. And within this nothingness, everything sleeps, all possibilities, all forms, all truths yet to be revealed. It is a silence that screams, a darkness that pulsates, a waiting charge with purpose. And when we think of light as something that has been awakened, we begin to understand that its origin lies not only in the voice that called it, but in the space where it rested. The abyss is the hidden stage of creation. It is there that the spirit hovers. It is there that the word prepares itself. It is there that the invisible organizes itself to become visible. But the most fascinating thing is that not everything has been awakened. Yes, part of the light responded. Part of creation emerged. But another part still sleeps, still rests in the abyss. And this is a powerful revelation, because it tells us that the creative process is not complete. that there are still secrets dormant within the world and within us, fragments of a greater consciousness that have not yet heard their "let there be." They have not yet been called, separated, illuminated, and perhaps this is the deepest spiritual mission, to become the one who calls, the one who awakens what still sleeps. This transforms the way we approach silence, life's dark periods, pauses that seem empty. Perhaps you experience moments like these, phases where everything seems suspended, where nothing moves, where there's no clarity. What if this is your own abyss? An inner space where there's still light to awaken, where there are still parts of you waiting to be named, understood, acknowledged? This is more than introspection. It's profound transformation. It is at this point that fear and fascination meet, because the abyss holds mysteries that challenge us. It holds forgotten memories of creation, and that is why so many ancient myths speak of deities who descend into the underworld, who face the darkness not to destroy it, but to rescue something, because there are treasures hidden in the depths. There are truths buried in shadows, and there are parts of the original light that can only be accessed when we have the courage to face the silence without haste. This process is slow, often uncomfortable, but absolutely necessary, because until we plunge into the abyss itself, our light remains partial, incomplete, illuminating only the edges of who we are, while the center remains unexplored. True clarity comes when we accept the descent, when we stop running from a darkness and decide to listen to it. And in doing so, something extraordinary happens. What seemed confusing begins to make sense. What seemed like pain reveals purpose. What seemed like an end reveals itself as a portal. The abyss then ceases to be a threat and becomes the origin, where everything came from, and to where, somehow, everything one day returns. Comment here. I carry light in the shadows. I want to know who else is ready for this deep dive. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because after all we've seen, the creative word, the forgotten text, the silence that precedes manifestation, the abyss that shelters consciousness, a truth begins to form. One that doesn't come shouting like doctrine, but whispering like remembrance. And this whisper says, the light wasn't born. It remembered. This changes everything. It changes our perception of origin, of time, of the very meaning of existence. Because if light was not created, but awakened, then creation is not a starting point, but a movement of return, a gesture of recognition, as if the universe, in its vastness, were merely a mirror where light looked at itself the first time and said, I am. This idea carries a profound impact. Because if creation is an awakening, not an absolute beginning, it invites us to reevaluate our entire human journey. Perhaps we are not here to build something new, but to remember what we already are. Perhaps true spiritual awakening is not about learning, but about remembering, a process of removing veils, dissolving illusions, reconnecting with what was always present, only forgotten. This memory is unlike any other. It's not information you read. It's not data you accumulate. It's an internal, silent recognition that awakens in layers. It comes with burning questions, with moments of silence that speak louder than any answer. It's that moment when something inside you says, I already knew that. I just didn't know I knew. And perhaps that's why this light has been hidden, because it can't be taught with ordinary words. It needs to be evoked. It needs to be called as it was in the beginning. It needs to hear the echo of the same voice that once said, let there be. And when that echo finds space within us, something moves, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. The light remembers itself when it finds permission, when it finds silence, when it finds truth, and in that instant, everything around it begins to make sense. The pieces align, cycles close, and you realize you're not just starting something. You're returning to a place that was never geographic, but eternal, a state of being that precedes names, history, and pain. And that's why so many people feel like they're awakening spiritually, even without understanding exactly what's happening. Because remembrance doesn't need proof. It just needs space. And the more space we give it birth, the more it expands. Not as an invasion, but as a loving recognition of who it is. Huziwis. Perhaps that's why the mystery of creation still pulses so deeply within us. because it's not over. It continues to happen. In every act of lucidity, in every conscious choice, in every instant when you stop repeating the world and begin to create from within. And in that moment, you're not just living, you're awakening. And if light is memory, then the abyss is oblivion. Darkness is not the opposite of light. It is its previous stage. It is the time in which it rests. It is the cradle of return. And perhaps you are here not to seek the light outside yourself, but to activate what has always been yours. You are not lost. You are remembering. Comment here. I am awakened memory. Because sometimes all the light needs is to be recognized. If you've made it this far, it's because something deep inside you recognized this light. And that's why it's worth continuing this journey together. This channel exists for this. To open space for questions that need no rush, for memories that can't be contained in doctrines, and to awaken something that may have been dormant for a long time. If this content made sense to you, if it touched something true, leave a comment saying, "This message was for me." This way I know who truly walked with me to the end. And if you felt this conversation was valuable, leave a like. It's a subtle but powerful way to keep this light expanding. Oh, and if you want to continue exploring these mysteries with me, subscribe to the channel here. There's still a lot to remember, and there's a video here to complement this dive. Click and stay with me there. Light still has a lot to say.